All right, it's Ty here. Welcome to the next in the 67 steps, the 67 principles, guidelines, frameworks, mindset that you're going to need to get whatever it is you're looking for in life: health, wealth, love, happiness. So, this next one I've titled, kind of a long name, Mike's Stack of Resumes, My 96-Year-Old Grandma, and Your Eulerian Destiny. How to create your one-sentence destiny plan. So, one of the most common, if not maybe the most common question that I'm getting now, and I'm getting thousands of emails at a time, is, and it's funny because this is coming from 18-year-olds and 50-year-olds, people saying, how do I know what I should be doing with my life? And I think the first thing that's interesting about this question, somewhere under this stack of books, I have a Peter Drucker book that some of, hopefully you've gotten. If you haven't gotten it yet, it should be in the mail to you, depending where you live. And in Peter Drucker's Managing Oneself, he says, in the past, you did not need to know your destiny. Why? Because, the last name Smith or Cooper, that means your father was a barrel maker, or your father was, a chef, or your father was a farrier, made horseshoes, or whatever it was. In past history, it was very we didn't have the choice that we have now. Now, we're going to talk about this later. If you've read Barry Schwartz's book, Paradox of Choice, maybe we have too much choice. But the upside, and I actually think it's a positive, is now you can definitely fit and what Martin Seligman calls your unique signature strength. So I want to talk about this from like 3 different standpoints, because it may be the number one question I'm getting. And I don't care what you're doing. You could be making $1 million right now. There's still refinements that can be made to match up. And the Managing Oneself book is primarily almost all about, can you match up your unique signature strength with what you're actually doing. So let's talk about this. First thing, I'm 18, 19 years old. I think it was my 3rd or 4th mentor that I had kind of collected over time. And he was one of the wealthiest guys in Europe, a venture capital guy out of Ireland. I was in the back of a pickup truck driving, and I've talked about, this is the same guy I talked about on one of the first of the 67 steps when I was talking about, he said, are you worth a damn? So he was telling me he gets about 27 people a day pitching a business idea to him. And I said, how do you decide? You can't. And this guy had hundreds of millions of dollars, but I said, how do you decide? Because if you have 27 people a day asking for $2 million, going to run out of money soon if you make some bad choices as an investor. And he said, simple, Ty. I look to see if they can tell me what they want to do in one sentence. Without the one sentence, he's like, you know what? Even if it's a good idea, even if it eventually will make them $1 million, I know they're not ready. So if you're listening to this and wondering what you should be doing with your life, whether it be career-wise, physically, romantically, friendship, socially, happiness, you don't quite feel fulfilled, I'm going to suggest to you, not my own words, but one of my first mentors. Can you tell me in one sentence what you're doing with your life? That's it. One sentence. I teach in a seminar that I do here in my house that you have 12 to 20 words maximum. So count them. And the less, the better, by the way. So here's mine, because people always ask me, all right, Ty, well, then what's yours? So mine, if I was meeting Mike as an investor, would be spreading good ideas using mass media. I've got it down to 6. It used to be a lot longer. So people present to me an idea, hey, Ty, you want to invest in this? I'm like starting with my framework. Does it help me spread good ideas using mass media? For most of you, the way you've gotten to know me is through the internet. We're working on other stuff, TV. I do, radio, podcasts, public speaking. These are all forms of mass media. So I've defined it broadly because my main thing is I'm not going to be able to do one-on-one. So I don't want to maybe be a school teacher, for example. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying my unique, we're going to talk about in a second, your Eulerian destiny. So the big question, though, for you is, how do you figure out those 6 or 7 words? Most people come to me and go, Ty, I've got so many choices. Let me start by popping that bubble. You don't have that many choices. I call this, I talk about this, and I call it, if you've been in any of my business seminars, I call this the 5% rule. What it means, I used to date this girl that almost won American Idol. And, Simon, she made it all the way to a final thing. She was here in Hollywood. And I had a long talk with her, and I was like, you know what? You're forgetting about the 5% rule. And she's like, what's the 5% rule? And I'm like, well, Hollywood's competitive. 1 to 100 of how good you are as a singer, you're obviously pretty good. You made it all the way to Hollywood, and you made it all the way on the #1 show on TV, American Idol, and you got pretty far along. But the last 5 points, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and 100, that's the only people who make it in the music business in Hollywood. So if you're a 93, you won't make it. You'll never be heard from. And for you, when you think, Ty, I'm good at lots of stuff. I'm like, really? You're good at lots of stuff. You're telling me on a scale, a global competitive scale, 7 billion people in the world, you're telling me you would be a 95, 96, 97, 98, 99 out of 7 billion people. And I don't think anybody, ask Michael Jordan, can be good at a lot of things in a world that's competitive. Michael Jordan, I talk about this book, got it here, Roland Lazenby. Here it is, Roland Lazenby. This book, Michael Jordan, The Life. Michael Jordan, best basketball player, dominating everything, defensive player, offensive player, scoring, world championship. But guess what? He decided, hey, I'm good at so much stuff. I've got so much choices. I'm going to go play baseball. He went and played baseball, and he couldn't even make it past the minorest of the minor leagues. He was not a disgrace to baseball, but he wasn't that good, man. There was thousands of players better than him. But when it came to that one signature strength, he's a 6'6" body. That was great for basketball, but for baseball, it made his strike zone too big. And over. So for you, if Michael Jordan, this man of immense talent, could only excel at one sport, what's to make you think that you have all these options? So the first thing I want to bring myself down to earth at all times and go, you know what, Ty? This thing of figuring out what you should be doing with your life is a heck of a lot easier. Most people are delusional, and that's why they think, oh, Ty, I have 10 choices, 20 choices. You don't. You have 10 choices to be average at something, but remember, the whole goal and why you're here is you want to live, remember what Thoreau said? The mass of men live lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. So the mass of humanity doesn't get this right, and they live lives of quiet desperation, meaning on a day-to-day basis, and you can test this yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't try to judge. This morning, did you wake up with a spring in your step? You popped out of bed because you were excited to go do whatever you were doing for work. You were excited to be with whoever you're dating or married to. You were excited in terms of fulfillment. You're like, yes, I feel like I know what I'm doing and where I'm going. Ask yourself that question. Are you 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, or 4-star? Most of us are not 4-star. And luckily in life, one of my first mentors, Joel Salatin, was such a role model to me because that's a man who tap danced to work. We're going to talk about this in another 67 steps. And he did it because it's obvious to me now in hindsight. He was following his Eulerian destiny, but he also, interestingly enough, followed what Mike said. If you ask Joel Salatin, and I thought this was the weirdest thing. I was 18 years old out of high school. I went there to do I ended up staying 2.5 years with him. And he was a Christian, and when he would pray around the table with his family, and I would there eating with the family, every day he would say the same prayer. He would say, God, I thank you for letting me help give the world the gift of good food. That was it. Let's say, give the world the gift of good food. 8 words. He had his Eulerian destiny. He had his life destiny and purpose congruent with what Mike told me, and congruent with this law of 5%, because Joel looked at his skills, and we're going to talk about how you can identify those practically. And he could, and he did become, through hard work, like the Michael Jordan of food. A lot of this, grass-fed, organic, a lot of you hear now, he's one of the, if not the number one guy, spokesperson for that. He's certainly in the top 5. So he picked something that he could be. Jack Welch, that he could be the best in. Jack Welch, the famous CEO, maybe the most famous CEO in business of the last, 50 years. He came into GE, General Electric, which at the time was a company doing well, but he grew it to the number one. I actually worked for GE Capital back in early 2000s, and he was one of he grew it to the biggest company in the world by market cap. Interesting story. He came in, and GE was literally in 300 different businesses. It's a diversified business. Airline engines, light bulbs, insurance, wealth management, all this. And he said, what are those businesses that we can be either number 1 or number 2 in? And every business there wasn't a fighting chance they'd be number 1 or number 2. He killed them. He literally sold them. He took the cash. I forget what the number was. I think it was $100 million or $200 million from the sale of those activities that he couldn't be number 1 or number 2. And he doubled down on all the things that he could be number 1 or number 2. So for you, I want to first start this whole conversation by killing the myth that you can be good at so many things. Michael Jordan couldn't. Jack Welch couldn't. I can't be. And I doubt you can be. Everyone, now people say to me, Ty, what about Leonardo da Vinci? You got me there. Every 500 years in history comes along a person of such epic proportions, an epic IQ and skill set that he can be good at art and anatomy and science and war machines and so on. But you know what? Do you know the odds? I'm certainly no Leonardo da Vinci, and I'm going to bet statistically you're not either. We're in the same boat together. If we can be remembered and leave impact around one main thing, that's enough. I remember one of my business partners, as I begin to get into bigger and bigger businesses, I was up at his house. It's a 40,000 square foot house. A guy, one of the most successful real estate developers in the world. And he said to me, I was telling him all these different things we were going to do in the new business. I was like, we're going to do this and this and this. And I'll never forget, he has a 40,000 square foot house, this monstrous house. I never even saw the whole thing while I was there. Stayed there for a couple of days. He said, Ty, he held up his finger. He said, one thing. Just be good at one thing. So what we want to start with today and end with is, how can you identify 6 to 8 words that define what you're going to do, that you can take serious ground on, right? Meaning you can be in a 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, or 100th percentile globally. Let's set our goals high. Now you might say, Ty, I don't have that level of talent. Well, you probably have it if you pick one niche and defend that niche. So how do you do that? Because that's the question next, right? This begs the next question. How in the world can you identify? Well, like I said, it starts by going, there's not a lot of things. I'm telling you. Do not have what I call American Idol syndrome. I talked about this girl I dated that was on American Idol. Well, if you watch American Idol, it's basically only good to watch for 2 reasons. The really exceptional singers and the people who are horrible but think they're good. I was actually with some friends at the Santa Monica Mall, and there was this guy singing. And I was thinking, LA attracts the most 80s, 81s, 82s, 83s, 84s, 85s, all the way up to 95s. So this guy was pretty good, but compared to a great singer like Pavarotti or Adele or who, even Ariana Grande, or Mariah Carey. This guy, they're like, Mariah Carey has a 6-octave voice range. She's a 99. This guy was at best an 85. Now, where he comes from, some little town somewhere in the world, he was probably the best singer. But he forgot the world's competitive now. It's not going to cut it to be an 80 or 85. I know this guy's not going to make it in Hollywood. Now, that's not to say, you can stay a singer for the enjoyment. I play the piano. I'm not that good at it, but I get personal enjoyment, but I don't try to make it my profession. That's what this guy was trying to do. So I don't want, and you see that on American Idol, people are just so deluded. When they open their mouth, it's like, I'm the best singer, and everybody around the world is laughing at them. You don't want that to be you. You don't want to be, I talked to this girl that's from Europe, and she's like, I want to move back to LA and become a model. She already came out here, couldn't make it modeling, and it's not because there's anything wrong with her. It's not because she's ugly. It's just modeling is a very specific business. You can be beautiful, but if you're not a certain kind of photogenic on camera, and I was telling her, I was like, my favorite American Idol, I felt like saying this, is one of the first American Idols. It's just Simon and Randy Jackson. And this kid comes out. He's wearing a green sweater. You might remember this. If you don't, you can YouTube it. It's hilarious. It's kind of sad, yet hilarious at the same time. And he says, I think Randy Jackson's like, what are you going to sing, man? And he's like, I'm going to sing Madonna, Like a Virgin. And I'm like, okay. And they just start. And this kid is just, it's one of the worst things you've ever seen. He just looks weird. He literally goes, like a virgin. Anyway, that's my bad impression of a bad singer. And Simon stops him. I was like, hold on. And he goes, you have to be, he goes, there was another kid that I said is the worst singer in America. He goes, you have to be the worst singer in the world. And this kid's like totally defeated. And then Randy Jackson, though, said something interesting that's rather profound and relevant to what I'm talking to you about today. Randy Jackson said, what else do you like to do? And the kid goes, well, people say I'm good at dancing. And Randy Jackson said, maybe you should dance, dog. That was his way of saying the same thing that we're talking about today. Why are you torturing yourself and the whole world? That's a Pareto inefficiency. You're never going to do it, so you're going to lose. And everyone who has to put up with the screeching voice that you have is losing. In the same way, I want you to have big goals, but I don't want you to be delusional. I want you to have big goals around what Martin Seligman talks about as your signature strength. So how do we find that? First, I want you to think of, and this is where I came up with this Eulerian destiny. If you remember back geometry, math, there's kind of concentric circles and Venn diagrams, and there's the Eulerian concepts. And they're basically like, where do different spheres interact and intersect? That's where you're going to find your destiny. So there's 4 that I want you to think about today. 4. The first one is what you grew up around, okay? Dr. Helen Fisher, that's the first circle. If you have a piece of paper, and you should have your 3-ring binder out, I want you to draw 4 circles, and I want them to slightly intersect. Boom, boom, boom. 4 of them. The first one I want you to draw, what did I grow up around? So for me, I grew up, my mom was divorced when I was young. My mom grew up, was a single mom. She took me back, raised by my grandma and grandpa. What did I do? I was raised by 2 professors, college professors. Now, I was very young. Dr. Helen Fisher says, though, when you're extremely young, you form what she calls a love map or a destiny type map. She was talking about it in the context of love, but you could apply this to anything. It's a subconscious layout of how the world will naturally unfold to you in all ways, whether it's romantically, business-wise. This is why most people are doomed to stay in whatever socioeconomic strata that they were born in. If they're born extremely poor, 99% of extremely poor people stay extremely poor. 99% of extremely wealthy people, middle class, so on. It's not just because of economic systems, although that is a part. It is in part because our subconscious mind, mimicry, it creates that. So I don't want you to ignore, although you may be a lucky person that grew up around amazing influences, or you maybe are like people, there's great people that grew up in, Oprah Winfrey grew up in abusive environments. So hopefully there's some hint for there in that first circle, okay? You may have none, but most people will find some clues there. For me, I was around educators, so I feel like there was some natural kind of destiny already set for me. I was lucky. The second one and this is absolutely important to avoid American Idol syndrome, is what the second circle we're looking for intersection is, what have you had, I call them stranger feedback. If you remember in the Peter Drucker books, he talks specifically about the way to figure out your strengths are what he called feedback analysis. So I'm building upon that, and I like to use the word stranger feedback. If that kid who went on American Idol had gotten some strangers, not his mom, not his best friend, not his uncle, not somebody who's biased in his favor, and he had sang for them like karaoke and then been like, hey, I'm thinking of going on American Idol, the feedback would have clearly from strangers have been like, I don't think that's the thing for you. So look back all the way back to your first memories. What have strangers consistently complimented you on? So we got the first circle, what you grew up around. Second one is this one. What have you been complimented by strangers? That's the key word. You're going to have to filter out all the compliments you got. I was working with a guy in business, one of the top health guys in Europe, and I said, what's stranger compliments? And he said, strangers have complimented me on my smile. And I said, well, are you on camera a lot? Are you on YouTube videos? He's like, no. And I'm like, you're not building around your strength. Remember what Peter Drucker says? Most people don't think they know what they are good at. Most people are wrong. Even more people think they know what their weaknesses are. Even then, more people are wrong than right. Yet, you can only build upon strength. You can't, and it says you can only build around strength. Nobody can build around weakness. You and I live in a world, because of our education system and various forces outside of our control, that is completely structured to build around people's weaknesses. I don't know why. It makes no sense. You may have a college degree. I started college, dropped out, but I can't believe, and it's a complete tragedy, that most of junior high and high school doesn't have one class you're taking every semester where you're completely defining every aspect of your personality, whether it be starting with the Myers-Briggs test, whether it be starting with various aptitude and career. They shouldn't let you into college. Forget taking the MCATs and the SAT awards. You should not be able to go into college until you've clearly laid out what your signature strength is. And that should entail a lot of stranger feedback. If strangers always tell you how good your smile is, you probably should be on camera. For me, I was always told, even from strangers, that Ty, you read pretty fast. Even I started reading at 1 or 2 years old. My grandma has little pictures where I would sit on when they were potty training me, and I'd have big Curious George stacks of books. These stacks of books that you see all around me, for whatever reason, I've always been interested in books, and strangers have always noticed it. And if you notice now, one of the things that's been effective for me in business is building around a signature strength. These books are not random. They come from a careful application of what you're learning today, and you're going to be able to walk away from this video and do for yourself. So, second one is stranger feedback. The third one is now, if you're older, now if you're listening to this and you're only 18, this may not apply, but it could still apply. What have you been doing for the last 10 years? Don't ignore, like Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours. I prefer the saying, the 10 dark years. Picasso had the 10 dark years. Bill Gates, from age 20 to 30, said, I never took a day off, not even one. He went into this period of dark years where you're honing and refining your skill. Even prodigies like, Mozart, for example. Beethoven, all these great people, there's periods of time where their music was not that good. And a lot of the stuff that's their best stuff came out after 10 years. So if you happen to have 10 years in anything, you can use that. I was at this conference and this guy, he was like, I'm 44 years old. I don't know what I should be doing. I said, well, what'd you want to do at 14 when you were younger? Because oftentimes I've talked about that you have a clear picture untainted by fear and trauma. He's like, I wanted to be a tennis player. And I said, well, what do you do now? He said, I sell shoes at Nordstrom. I said, well, don't ignore those last 10 years. Why don't you merge sales? Why don't you go sell for one of the big, I said, who makes tennis apparel, tennis equipment? And he named all these names. I'm like, why don't you work for him? And it was like a light bulb. It was like, bam. I could tell he was going, why didn't I think of that? So for you, This third one, what you've been doing the last 10 years. For me, the last 10 years, most of the business I've been in, some form of education. When I was doing food and agriculture and organic, all that with Joel Salatin was writing 7 or 10 books. I think he's written 10 books. And he was speaking. So I was around education. Then when I got in, even in nightclubs, I taught people how to do salsa dancing, became one of the big salsa dance teachers in the world. Or I don't know, in the whole world, but pretty big. I taught about 5,000 people salsa, so I was education, even though in that entertainment. And then when I got into finance, became a CFP, using that, we were educating our clients. Even when we got into investing in other things online, really leaned towards social interaction, education stuff. So when I look today at what I want to do, I told you my short one-sentence plan, spread good ideas using mass media. That's congruent with what I've been doing the last 10 years. So don't ignore your last 10 years, even if you've been doing something you hate in the last 10 years. Like this guy clearly did not love selling shoes at Nordstrom. But I was like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't have to see those 10 years as complete waste. You obviously built some skills in sales particularly, which will for sure be valuable if you can get your life destiny a little more on track. Then the last thing, and very important, is what can you talk about effortlessly on a Saturday night when you're not working and you're with your friends? Don't ignore that. I love to talk about ideas and books and things like that. So what do you like to talk about like Picasso talks about? Avoid the dichotomy of doing something you hate during the week to make money for your spare time. Never live for your weekends. Joel Salatin used to tell me, if you have to go on a vacation from what you do, you should never come back, right? So as you think about that, you should just look back at the last 2 weekends. Every time you're around people, do you talk about politics a lot? Talk about cooking? Talk about sports, gardening? This is a clue that will help you piece together. So hopefully you've been writing this down, these 4 things, intersecting. Where do they all meet? That's the Eulerian kind of concentric that's where all these things touch. That is the intersection. And somewhere around there, you don't have to come up with the complete answer. I want you to think about this over these 67 days. That's why this is 67 days. At the end of these 67 days, I want you to have even more clarity than you might have today. But you must boom, boom, boom. Must ideally, what you grew up around, some of you grew up around horrible experience, but let's take Oprah Winfrey. Robin Robbins, I think is her name. I saw her, I went to the ESPY Awards, which is like the Academy Awards for sports last summer, or 2 summers ago. All the pro basketball players, football players there. And Robin Wright came. She was a host, I think, of Good Morning America or something like that. And she used to be a professional athlete. And she talks about how she had cancer. And her mom told her when she was depressed, her mom said, make your mess your message. And so she had built her life around raising money for cancer and cancer awareness. So going back to that first circle, if you happen to be somebody who lived had a horrible upbringing, you can't think of anything that you learn from people. I was lucky enough to have a grandma and grandpa that I learned stuff from. If that's you, then maybe you need to be like Robin Wright or Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey took her horrible upbringing, and if you look a lot on the Oprah Winfrey show, it was a lot about families creating, get rid of dysfunction between parents and children and husband and wife and girlfriend and all that. So she took that clues, I think, from her childhood, and it helped her become what she was. And she, in many ways, Oprah has lived the good life. She passes what we call the funeral test. When Oprah dies, a lot of people are going to be sad. A lot of people are going to be sad, and that's a good mark if you've been living the good life. So, a couple things, because this is such important, so important of a topic. All right, Josh, you want to stop it for a second?
Yeah.
That was 29 minutes.
Did it stop it already?
No, I just stopped it before on perfect.
Cool.
And then shouldn't take me too much longer.
Okay. Do you want to take a break or anything?
Nah, let's keep going. All right, so we're at the second part here.
1 second. You're on.
Cool. So the second part, begin. So let's examine this, because I don't want to be too narrow in how we're defining destiny. Because I told you my kind of business destiny. But remember, I feel there's a health destiny, a wealth destiny, a love destiny, and a happiness destiny. And they're different. So for you, These 4 circles we were talking about, you got to do them also for your body, okay, physically. I meet so many people, they read some book, Born to Run. Great book, all about the Tarahumara Indians who can jog 100 miles a day or 80 miles a day. They deliver the mail on foot. I actually went to the mountains. It's cool. The Copper Canyon in Mexico. And you read a book like that and you're like, oh, I'm going to become a jogger. Well, the question still is, look at the 4 concentric circles. You know, does your body seem to match up with that? When people look at you, you're like, yeah, you should clearly be a jogger. You might be a stocky person. You're probably not going to be like a Kenyan Olympic runner. So your destiny there, maybe you're better suited to be a power lifter. When it comes to physical health, you must be and Dr. Sharon Molam told me the same thing, you must be precise. Some people, vegan makes sense, or vegetarian. Genetically, I'm not talking about the ethics of it. That's a whole nother conversation that I can't answer for you. But just put your body, take blood tests, put you under a scanner, what's healthy for you. He clearly said some people should have no fruit. They're fructose intolerant. He said, Ty, they will die with 1 apple. So there's no one-size-fits-all destiny for your body. You must discover it. Now, I'm not going to get totally into the health one. That's a separate conversation. We do some other courses on health, how you can figure out, I work with some of these top experts like Dr. Molam and different ones, how you can really, and that's the future of health, by the way. He said, we're going to be able to swab your mouth and tell you if you should be a bodybuilder, if you should do long-distance running, if you should drink coffee. People say coffee's good for you. It's not good for everybody. And for other people, it's very good. You must find out what racehorse and what race course. You must have a 6-word or 8-word physical destiny. For me, it seems, and I could be wrong, that I do well with a lot of vegetables and meat. I do well with basketball, some competitive stuff. I really get bored if I look back at feedback analysis asking me to run 20, a marathon. I would be bored out of my mind. I'll never do it consistently. I like weights. My dad was a top bodybuilder. I grew up around that. My mom was around that. Last 10 years, I've done a lot of that kind of work. So it's kind of, what do I like to do on a Saturday if I had to work out? I would play basketball. So I believe that is part of my physical destiny to maintain my health. I already talked about work. When it comes to love, it's the same way. Mother Teresa, some people see that getting married is the epitome and the highest level you can have of impact socially and love-wise. Mother Teresa took a vow to never be married, or Jesus Christ, or different spiritual leaders. They did other things. So there's no one destiny, even when it comes to friends, family, romance. Casanova, forget the romantic side. He was a social butterfly. He was friends with Voltaire. He was friends with Frederick the Great, the greatest leaders. He clearly, if you look at Briggs-Myers test you can do, whether you're an extrovert, introvert, you should be looking at that stuff, because socially, that could be your destiny. Hugh Hefner, he has a destiny. You may not agree with it morally. It's far out there what he did. And I'm only bringing him up because it's an extreme example of a little bit what an Amish guy told me. It's kind of a funny conversation to bring up Hugh Hefner and the Amish in the same sentence. But David Chupp, an Amish guy, lived no electricity, grew up his whole life in a world with technology. And I asked him, he was 30, 40 years old. I said, David, how do you make sense of this world, or you believe that this is the way you should live? And he said, well, Tom, my dad told me it takes a lot of different people to make the world go around. If you listen to Steve Jobs' Harvard or Stanford or Harvard commencement speech, where he was just about to die, tragically, he said something along the lines of, don't live other people's dreams for you. And that can be a little cliche, but again, when it comes to social life, know yourself. The most ancient of Platonic, Socratic, Plato and Socrates teachings, know thyself, and match up using the same destiny. Did you grow up in I grew up in a very social family. My mom, very outgoing. My grandma, very outgoing. My dad, even though I didn't really grow up with him, very outgoing. It made sense that that's in my mental framework. Last 10 years, I've done many social things. Even on a farm, I lived on farms where Joel Salatin would get 200 or 300 visitors a day. Even at the Amish, they're in the middle of nowhere, but they're a huge community. Nightclubs, all these businesses, social networks online. It made sense that way. My destiny was a very social person. Feedback from strangers. I tend to get along with strangers, so I got good feedback, and I've got what I can do effortlessly. If you give me a Saturday night when I don't have anything to do, I don't mind being social. So, but that might not be you, right? There's a good book, The Power of Introverts. Bill Gates, these kind of guys like to disappear from the world. So you must find your destiny. And we know now scientifically this stuff is happening at a gene level. There's some predisposition, there's some quote unquote fate, and some of it can be changed. But you will not, as Peter Drucker talks about this, Charlie Munger talks about this, you're probably not going to make massive changes, okay? If you're extremely introverted, you probably should become a little more extroverted to balance yourself out, but you're probably never going to be a Jerry Weintraub who just loved to be around people at all time, right? That's not going to be your thing, and the good news is horses for courses. There's a lot of ways to make this, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as they say. I guess it's kind of not a very political correct thing. It's what farmers used to say. The last one is around happiness. If you read Freud, I've recommended this book. I recommend it again. It's a very short book of his essay, Civilization and Its Discontents. Essay number 2, you can skip right to that. Read that. It's a profound set of 5 or 10 pages where he outlines what makes people feel fulfilled. You're going to hear lots of sweeping generalizations that are extremely inaccurate. Things like love is all you need, or the answer is in, withdrawing from yourself, kind of a Buddhist understanding this, being like a hermit, and that intellectualism is all you need, beauty is all. There's all these ways that humans tend to try to find happiness. Well, the truth is, as Freud says, is that humans have unique constitutions, and you must put together the mixture of these that better suits you. And that is how you find fulfillment. It is not in, some people are not lovers, they're fighters. And we need those people. When the enemies come to the gate, I'm going to tell you who you want standing up there. You don't want the lovers. You want the fighters. But when it comes to nurturing and growing a civilization, you want the nurturers. Find your place and fit in it, and don't let anybody fool you. Whether it's media, we've talked about cognitive biases from the media portraying, you watch Braveheart and it's like, ooh, I want to be a fighter, or Rocky. You watch Gandhi and you're like, ooh, I want to be a humanitarian. But you remember the 5% I said? You got to find that thing you can excel in. Alexander the Great clearly excelled in being a warrior. And Mother Teresa clearly excelled in being a nurturer. And Nelson Mandela clearly excelled in being a statesman later in life. And all these things. Arnold was, he had this composition that made him uniquely suited to be in the top 5% or the top 1/10 of 1% in that chosen field. Not all of us are as talented as Arnold Schwarzenegger. I know I'm not, but you can be talented and take ground in one thing. So remember, I talked about the one other thing as we kind of wrap this up. I said my 96-year-old grandma, when you write out this 6-word destiny, and you can start with just the one area that's more clear, business, or maybe you create one for overall life, keep it simple. I've written an article on my site, tylopez.com, about the bouncer of the brain, and I really expand on this, what David Ogilvy taught. And one of the things is you need to be able to explain. Other people need to hear your message. And my 96-year-old grandma, it's a test. If you would tell my 96-year-old grandma your one-sentence plan, if she wouldn't understand it, it's too complicated. Notice, if I said to my grandma, she said, what are you doing with your life, Ty? I said, well, I want to spread good ideas using mass media to educate. Maybe I'd add a few more words. I think she'd understand what I was saying. Sometimes when I talk to people, they're like, Ty, I came up with my first one-sentence plan. I'm like, what is it? They're like, we're going to leverage social media into existing platforms. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying. And nobody in the world is going to take the glycogen in their brain and use it to try to figure out what you're doing. So as you come through these, simple is the secret password for the day. Keep it simple. Say, if you're, let's say, Warren Buffett, I'm going to invest money. I am going to invest money. 6 words. My 96-year-old grandma would understand it, and my, a 10-year-old would understand it. As you do your physical health one, be like, I am going to be a sprinter. I'm going to play basketball. I'm going to eat fish and vegetables. My body does well with coffee and green tea and, I don't know, spinach. Whatever it is, pick something simple. When it comes to love, be like, I'm probably going to get married young, have a lot of kids, and that's what I feel like. Or, you know what, I'm going to be a hard driving person that's going to wait and this. I'm going to have a few close friends and I'm going to double down on them. Or I'm going to be the life of every party. Pick one. I will tell you this because I've tested many and experimented with many things. You will not get increased happiness from either one of those. Being a social butterfly or having a tight-knit group of friends, there's no increase in happiness if you take 100 people who employ those two strategies 50-50. Where the happiness comes from is figuring out which one you are, because if you are an extrovert and you put yourself in an introverted life, I've done this. I did this for about a year in my life. It was a horrible year. I did not like that year. And remember I talk about what's the difference between an experiment and a mistake? Experiment is a mistake. A mistake is an experiment I ran too long. So I should have ran that one for about 3 months. That's or 66 days, 67 days like you're in this program. So run your experiments, run them quickly. Don't be afraid to change, morph around. So the question I want you to ask, let's pick one. Let's pick business destiny. I think that's Jim Rohn says business is good. It's easy to define and quantify because it's money. Right here on the page, to close out this lesson, what is your 1-sentence business plan? Make sure it follows my 96-year-old grandma word. Maybe make sure it's under 12 to 20 words, less than that, or else it gets too long. And then I want you to write, just write that. That's simple. Just the one part kind of piece I want to lead you. Try to write it. Then I want you to do that. Make sure you have your 3-ring journal, 3-ring binder, 67 steps. Write that out. Work on that. That's so important. I'm telling you, the answer to almost every piece of advice people ask me to give them is, do you have your 1-sentence plan? And if they say no, I'm like, I can't help you. How can I give you advice if I don't know what you want? Right? If your 1-sentence destiny is to be a millionaire, and your other 1-sentence destiny is to be Robin Hood and give to the poor, it's 2 different strategies. There's no advice possible. There's no sweeping advice in a world of 7 million people. I talk about this in my TED Talk. I thought there was. I wanted my grandpa Charles to give me one piece of advice, but he said, Ty, the world's too complicated, my friend. So refine it down. Avoid the pitfalls, American Idol syndrome, thinking you can be good at everything. Remember the 5%. You got to be in the top 5%. Jack Welch, double down on the stuff you can be number 1 or number 2 in your specific area. Focus on that business. Remember, this is, in some ways, I was tempted to make this the first of the 67 steps, but I put it later for good reason. So don't skip this one. Spend a lot of time on this in the next 24 hours till you get the next 67 steps. All right? Thanks so much. See you next on the next 67.